What's up YouTube, and welcome to my pickups video for the month of September 2024, or known as the month that I wasn't home. I had a lot of travel this month, so I kicked off the month with a work trip to Kansas City, followed very shortly by another work trip to Colorado, and then I went to visit my college town outside of town a little bit, about 100 miles away, and then I just got back from Portland, Oregon for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo once again. Great time at the con as usual, and really was a much expanded sales floor this year. They made some changes as far as like how the room was set up, and also some of the events and things like that they had, where they added some and took some away as well. So made for a lot more people selling stuff this year. I did get quite a bit of things, including a Grail that I've always wanted. So very happy to show that, as well as some other things I picked up along the month. So we'll kick off with some games to start off. I did get one new release. This actually came in the mail. This was a very long time in coming from Strictly Limited Games, who has a very bad reputation for game delays and not keeping their customers informed of what's going on with those. And finally, they decided to poop out Eschatos, which I ordered over a year and a half ago. So very happy to get this in the collection. It is a shooter that originally came out for the Xbox 360 in Japan only, and I never got that version even though it was import friendly, but I always was curious about the game. The main reason I wanted this though was the two bonus games that were included in both the Xbox version as well as this, which were WonderSwan games. They were games that were made for the WonderSwan color and excellent shooters. Judgment Silver Sword is one of them, and then Cardinal Sins is the other. They're just mentioned slightly here on the back. All from the same developer. Eschatos is essentially a spiritual sequel to those, but it doesn't really have the same charm as those very 8-bit looking games do on the WonderSwan. So definitely enjoyed playing through those this month. Cardinal Sins is more of like a boss battle mix-up type game, and then Judgment Silver Sword is a little bit more straightforward. But they're really fun to play and very addictive, so I probably will be putting some more time into those. Eschatos didn't really hold my attention as much. I think it's just because it's getting to be kind of old for a 3D-based shooter. But, you know, the other games definitely are very cool. So, shame on Strictly Limited, once again, for taking forever and a day to get this put out. But very happy that it exists now, and so it is a welcome addition to my PS4 collection. So we're going to talk about some PS1 games next. I actually did get a couple PS1 games for the collection this month. First one of these was at my college town game store. I took a chance on this just because it was very cheap. This is Extreme Go-Kart Racing by H-Tech, or their A1 Games budget title lineup. This was one of the final games that they released in that series, so I don't think they made a whole ton of these. It's not expensive by any means, it's a very cheap game, but this was ultimately one of the Simple 1500 series games in Japan, which was also a budget title that they just converted over for a cheap kart racer port. So definitely going to check it out, but not expecting very much from this, but nice to have at least another weird H-Tech release for the collection. And then the other game I got for PS1 was At the Con. This is a game that actually has been on my list for a long time. It's very uncommon to me, and whenever I find it, it seems to be like all over the place with pricing. And so I found a vendor at the con that was willing to negotiate with me a little bit, and ultimately got it for a very good price, and that is Bust a Groove 2 for the PS1. This is an Enix published game for the PS1, which there weren't a whole lot of those, and actually gets me very close to a full subset of all their titles. I think I'm only missing maybe one more to have all of those. But it was a rhythm-based dance action game, believe it or not, which is not really something Enix is known for. I think it was actually developed by a different company, and then they just put it out. The first game in the series also came to the US, and Sony themselves actually published that one. Put a little bit more marketing muscle behind it, and I think it completely bombed. So when it came time to do the sequel, they were just like, yeah, Enix, go ahead and do your own thing. So nice we got these in the US. The other interesting thing is they were released as Bust a Move in Japan, but that game series title was already taken in the US because Puzzle Bobble in Japan became Bust a Move, the Taito game puzzle game series in the US long before these games. So they had to change the title a little bit to put it out here, but looking forward to checking this out. I know I know both these games have their fans. I played the first one a little bit. I have that one, but this is one I've never actually played before. So looking forward to seeing what the sequel enhancements do to this game. So the other game I got this month was At the Con, and I did a lot of hem-hawing about this. I saw it on the first night that I was there of the 3 days of the con, and I said, wow, that would be really cool to have in the collection, but I am not about to spend that kind of money. And then I walked by it again day 2, and I was like, it's still here. Somebody didn't grab it. It is definitely one of the grails of the whole show, in my opinion, and definitely the only one that was for sale at the whole event, but it was still sitting there at the booth. And so day 3 came around, I walked around the table, and lo and behold, it was still sitting there. And then about 10 minutes before the whole con was over on Sunday night, I stopped by the booth again and asked the vendor, would you be willing to do a, I don't want to haul this home price on this, and I don't want to embarrass you, but, you know, you tell me, like, can we come to a deal on this? So we went back and forth a little bit, and ultimately I bought the game, and this is by far the most I have ever spent on a video game. But, that being said, I did get a very fair price on this, so I'm very happy about it. And that game, drumroll please, is the Dynastic Hero for Turbo Duo. This is definitely one of the rarest games on the US Turbo Duo. Very late release, and actually a high quality title. Just very cool that we got this game in the US at all. Came out in Japan as well, was much cheaper there. But the legacy or story behind this one is it's actually a part of the Wonder Boy series. It's basically the same game as Wonder Boy and Monster World, on Sega Genesis, but with a different lead character due to some like copyright things with Sega and Westone, the company that actually developed the game. I think it has some cinemas and enhanced CD music, so ultimately this has a little bit of perks that the other one doesn't have. But this is a very, very hard game to come by. I probably have only seen this game in person maybe one other time in my life. And on eBay, I would say it pops up maybe 3-4 times a year. Like, not a whole lot of these change hands. So I bit the bullet on this one. There were a few other grails at the show that I was kind of debating on which one I would rather take home. But I thought, you know, at the end of the day, this is one that's going to be a lot harder for me to find, especially out in a store somewhere or something like that. And then you have the added benefit of Oregon is that there's no sales tax, and I didn't have to pay to ship it or like buy it just based on pictures. So I decided just to go ahead and go for it. And I'm kind of happy I did. I'm looking forward to playing this. I just got back from the event, so I haven't played it yet. But this is a very, very cool game to have in my Turbo Duo collection. And ultimately, I think probably the most expensive of the CD games on the system. It's up there with a couple others that are pretty close neck and neck. But now that maybe I have this, I should go for the full CD set. But I don't know, that's a little bit far away. There's some other pretty pricey titles out there that I'm not as excited to spend the money on as I was for this one. So Portland Gaming Con was a success, I guess, based on me finding this. And I'm sure there were some other people looking at this if they saw it on the table. The vendor was actually really cool. He was selling off a private collection of mostly like dupes that I think he had inherited from a family member. And it must have been a very, very impressive collection because he had some awesome stuff at the booth. And much better than even some of the professional store vendors did at the event. So nice that we were able to come to terms. I know I'm kind of gushing about this, but I'm very excited to get this in the collection. So that is all the games I got at the event and throughout the month, but I did get other gaming-related stuff, as always. So let's talk about manuals next. I would say at the Portland Con, this is one of the main reasons I still go, is because I can typically find a lot of manuals there. This year was no exception. Honestly, I would say there were probably more vendors selling manuals this year than I've ever seen before at the event. I think we're getting to the point that like games are getting thin on the ground and vendors are looking for like anything that they can sell at this event to make some money. And they've also realized that manuals do have collector value, which is different than the old days where they just would put a box on the table and say, I don't know, $2 a piece. You know, like now everything's individually priced. We're looking it up, trying to make sure nobody's getting over on you, that kind of thing. So it's not like I got a screaming deal on these, but it was nice to buy them in person, not have to pay shipping on it, and not have to worry about them getting beat up in the mail and things like that. So let's talk about Game Boy manuals first. I got a few interesting ones. So I got the original Adventure Island. I got home and I wasn't positive if I didn't have this one, but I didn't. I had Adventure Island 2 on Game Boy, the manual for that one. So nice to get another one of these. I kind of like the Hudson Soft games for the Game Boy because they had just a nice art aesthetic to them, and ultimately a lot of games that are fun to play on the system too. But very happy to get that one. Next up is a manual that's kind of a sleeper on the Game Boy. This is Mr. Do, which is a pretty common game in Europe, and if you really look at the Game Boy games closely, you'll see that most of the ones that even made it to the US are the European version of the game. But they did print some US label versions of the game, and also the manual has like a -USA at the end of the title here, just to indicate that this is the US pressing of the manual. So it is very difficult to find this, as well as the US version of the cartridge, which I already have. So nice to get this. I'd love to find the US version of the box, but for some reason Ocean did not release a whole lot of these in the US, even though it must have been a pretty popular game in Europe. But Mr. Do is always a fun arcade-style game to play on just about any system it's come to. I did get a couple Taito manuals, which is cool. First one of these is Super Chase HQ, which has a wonderful Ferrari Testarossa on the cover, which I love. And also this is notable because it is the original Taito pressing of the manual. This game got re-released by Natsume, and so there is a Natsume version of the manual that's a little more common, but nice to have that. And then I got another Taito manual. This one is one that was probably pretty hard to find, and this is the Jetsons for Game Boy. So nice to get that, an original Taito pressing as well. This one, I should say, this one didn't get a Natsume re-release, but nice to find this in the Taito form. Then I got some NES manuals. First one of these was before the con, and this is a pretty cool one to get for the NES. This is the original G.I. Joe. I already had the manual for the other G.I. Joe game on NES, but this is probably the better of the two games, and so nice to get that one in pretty good shape. And then the rest of these I did get at the con. I did a lot of digging for NES manuals, and I can say that like I'm getting so close to having the full set now that there's a lot of time wasted just going through bins and bins and bins, and I might not even find a single one after digging for 10 or 20 minutes. So after a lot of hard work, I found a few to bring home, and some of these were pretty good ones, so I was happy to get these. But first one of these is Dragon's Lair. This one I think I've passed by multiple times thinking I already had it, but I did see that it was on my list, so I decided to grab that. That was probably the cheapest of the batch. This one's eluded me for some time. This is the Crash Dummies, or Crash Test Dummies, whatever they are. Crash Dummies. Incredible Crash Dummies. Based on the stupid advertising campaign they had about buckling your seatbelt back in the day. I don't know why they thought that this would make a great game, but they did. It is a pretty late release for the system. I think this one kind of flies under the radar, so it is a pretty uncommon cartridge as well, but nice to get that in the manual as for the collection too. Then I got another one that I probably have passed by over the years, but this was a very clean copy of this manual, and I turned out I needed it. This is Mule, or M-U-W-L-E. One of the rare 4-player games for the system, and kind of a weird strategy action game. Very plain manual, though, I will say that. And then probably the highlight of the NES manuals I got is this also very late release rare title, and that is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And this one is notable because it's the Ubisoft version of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Very, very weird situation with this game. Taito also put out a game with the same title. They have very similar front box artwork, but the games themselves are actually totally different, and they both got released. And I still to this day don't really understand how that passed the NES Nintendo licensing test to release the same game twice with two different publishers and two different actual games released under the same title. So very weird series of events. Ubisoft was not the major powerhouse that they are today. They were very new as a company, and so I don't think they were printing a whole lot of their titles, not knowing how big they were going to be at the time. And this game is exponentially harder to find than the Taito version, and definitely the manual as well. I've probably never seen this manual before, so very happy to get that. I did get some Super Nintendo manuals as well. This one came in the mail from eBay, and this was just to match up with the box that I got last month. So I found Super Double Dragon for Super Nintendo. Recently just got the box with the registration card and all that, but I didn't have the manual, and then I already had the cartridge. So now this is good and complete, which is cool. Another one, similar situation. I bought this game boxed last year with like the poster, I think, but it didn't have the manual, and so it is Super Buster Brothers for Super Nintendo. So this one is now complete as well, which is one of my favorite games actually in the Super Nintendo, so happy to have that complete. And then I did get a big manual for Super Nintendo. This actually came from the same vendor as Dynastic Hero, and I bought this on the first night of the con when I was digging through his stuff then. And like I said, this guy had a lot of really good stuff in his booth, and so I got a big manual for the Super Nintendo for my collection, and that is Pocky and Rocky 2. Always liked getting, or I always loved this series, but this is one that's been a real thorn on my side to find. I don't have the box for this one, unfortunately, but I would love to find it someday and maybe make this one complete. But even just getting this is a very nice piece of the collection. So very cool to have that, and always have been a big fan of the series. I got one other upgrade at the show, which was for Game Boy, and this was the box and registration card and poster. It's missing the manual. I thought I had the manual at home, but apparently I don't, so I still need to track that down, but I do have the cartridge. So this one is nearly complete, and it is in really excellent shape, and that is for Atomic Punk for the Game Boy. Very unusual branding on this title. It's actually a Bomberman series game, and so when Bomberman first came out in the US arcades, one of the titles was branded as Atomic Punk, and so that's what they kept the title as when they brought this one to the Game Boy very early in the Game Boy life. Hudson Soft then reverted back to Bomberman for later Game Boy series games, but this one, it stands alone, and it has really cool artwork on it. and the box itself really stands out on the shelf. It has like this fuchsia side with a whole bunch of splatters and stuff like that, so even just on a shelf, like this one looks really sharp. But very happy to get this. I've always liked this game, and I think incredibly cool box that you just don't see very often. The vendor had a couple other really nice box-only Game Boy games that were a similar situation like this. They were missing the cartridge, but they were in like mint condition. And I tried to negotiate on one other one. They didn't really want to do a deal with me because it was early in the con, but I'm glad I at least grabbed this one, because when I went back on Sunday to go look for the other one again, it was gone. So probably somebody would have snatched this up as well. But box Game Boy stuff is getting really pricey, I will say, and at this year's con there was some really tempting stuff, but it was also very, very expensive. So need to find this whenever I can, because you just don't see a whole lot of this that was kept. Most Game Boy stuff seems like it was tossed. So we're getting toward the end here. I've got a couple other things from the con. So this was a complete wildcard impulse purchase. I was walking by a booth and I was like, what the hell is that? I didn't even know this existed, but I thought I gotta have this for the PS1 collection. So this is, it's been open, but it's in the original packaging. It's a very unique accessory called the Playback Memory Card by Interact. And it actually has a recording feature and a speaker on the memory card itself. And so the idea here is that with your 15 blocks of memory on a PlayStation 1 memory card, sometimes it's hard to remember what games you saved on which card, especially if you've got a big collection. So I can respect that. And so I guess the idea here is you would make a memo to self to say what games were stored on the memory card. So if you were going through a stack of memory cards, you could be like, oh, this is the memory card that I kept my irritating stick save file on. Perfect. Okay, I'll use this one. I'm sure it needs a battery. It doesn't work like right off the bat, but I haven't even played with it yet because I just got home. But this was obviously a failed accessory. I looked it up on eBay when I got home, and it looked like actually there's an expanded multi-page version of this as well, which I'm sure sold even less than this. And then as a bonus, it came in like a hard case to store 2 of these in if you were to buy another one. So it was kind of to incentivize you to stock up on these for your collection versus the normal memory cards, I guess, for the added purpose of recording all your save files of what's on there. So yeah, I think I'm going to put a battery in it, mess around with this, see what it actually does, if it still works, but I think it's kind of like creating a solution for a problem that didn't necessarily exist. I mean, if you really just need to know what's on a memory card, you could obviously just stick a sticker on the memory card itself and label what's on there, but you know, if you're that lazy and you want to use some technology to do it for you, it's kind of like a prehistoric Siri for your PS1, I guess. But kind of interesting that this existed, and I couldn't pass it up. I mean, it was just one of those things I was like, yeah, sure, I'll buy that, whatever. And then the last thing I got at the con was I always am looking for magazines at conventions. That's the other big thing I always try to hunt down, especially because I don't like shipping them. But there really weren't a whole ton of magazines this year. There were a lot of Nintendo Powers, which you expect. But as far as like weird stuff and things like that that I'm looking to collect, there really wasn't a whole lot. So I found one issue of EGM I didn't have. This is from 1997. And I'm kind of closing in the gaps of getting all the EGMs from the 1990s that I don't have. So this was just a nice little hole in my collection that I was missing. This was like right before I started subscribing to EGM, so I guess that's why I was missing this one. And then I bought some lots of ones that were kind of before this issue. So just nice to get one that I was missing that was a good price at the con. I just wish they would have had some more for sale. So that about does it. But yeah, good con as always. Weather in Portland was excellent this year. Con was like 2-3 weeks earlier than usual, and maybe that made a difference, but I would recommend checking it out if you ever get a chance to get up in the area. It is the biggest con in the United States, so I think it has no signs of slowing down. Attendance was very, very packed this year, and I think people had a really good time. So also, one thing that I saw that I wanted to mention is there was a booth selling gamer tattoos in the con. So if you just had to have a Super Mario 1-Up box on your arm, they had a guy there that would tattoo it on you for you in the middle of the con. So saw a customer getting something while I was there, and I thought that was interesting. That was something I've never seen at a con before, but more power to them if it worked out. So anyways, that about does it. Hope you enjoyed. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.